So a point you made very early is that energy transformed into work has substituted for labor. And so we trade energy for labor. And now we're trading energy for intelligence, and intelligence itself is a labor multiplier. So,
yeah, exactly.
So the question is, well, is trading energy for intelligence a good trade? It's like, well, that's what we do. That's what human beings do.
Is buying intelligence really cheaply a good thing?
Right.
Well, it's a good thing for every individual who buys it. So in the aggregate, it's probably going to be pretty good.
Yes. Well, and it's what you want to do when you hire someone to do a complex job. You're going to...
and people are just
pay for intelligence.
Like, it's so... Just as one final digression, people are just so... They just don't yet realize how efficient it's going to be to use these things for not every application by any means, but for many applications, they have all these things like, it doesn't always get directions proper. Oh, really? All your human employees always get the directions correct?
Right.
Like at this point, ChatGPT Pro is better than almost any human you will ever employ in terms of following directions. Like, it is really, really good in terms of just, if you write out what you think, if you say it in a circuitous way, it is pretty damn good. And in terms of like the output, this is another thing I think people don't get is they're like, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was running this CO2 thing, like this natural gas CO2 thing, and I ran it with the non-pro version of ChatGPT, and it gave me a false thing that was something like, I wanted to know how does the volume of natural gas compare to the volume of CO2 generated? Because one way to think about this idea of let's use fossil fuels and capture the CO2 is you need to build a whole new industry for the captured CO2. So if it's a 1-to-1 ratio, right? If it's a 1-to-1 ratio of natural gas and CO2, then you need to basically double the size of the industry, right? In terms of piping it and putting it underground. And I thought it was a 1-to-1. And then I was in the airport and talking to ChatGPT Plus, and it told me it was like 59 times. I'm like, that sounds wrong. But if that's true, that's crazy. And I was sort of excited, like, oh, wow, that's a blockbuster. But then I was like, I ran it the other day with ChatGPT Pro, and it said, no, it's 1-to-1, which made more sense to me. But it's like, okay, yes, sometimes it'll make a mistake like that, but I don't go to print with that thing without confirming it by an expert. But but even if it's right 95% of the time or 98% of the time, you can often get, I don't have the perfect words for this, but you can often get like the shape of what the solution will look like, even if not every value is correct. Mm-hmm. So you can get the idea of, you do need to build a whole new parallel industry, and it would cost a lot of money. Even if it's your estimate is 50 times too high, you can help think through it. So just the fact that it can make errors, humans can make errors too, but it can really help you explore territory and develop ideas very, very quickly. And then what you might find is that you make 1 or 2 errors at the end, but usually those are not decisive errors that throw out the whole project. Usually, because every kind of thought process involves lots and lots of little assumptions and interrelationships. And if you get 98% of that right, probably the overall thing is going to be right. Yeah. Probably a very small percentage of the time it's going to be, there was one false assumption and the whole thing is wrong. I have yet to find that. It could happen. But so I think people are just underestimating how good this stuff is going to be.
Although not the people who are demanding more energy so that they can make faster artificial intelligence systems. They're not underestimating it. Yeah, and that's why they're driven to do. And they may be even overestimating certain things, and it could be we're back in 5 years, and there might even be a bubble in certain ways. But at this point, it's obvious that for a lot of people, it's going to help them. And I would just say, as an entrepreneur who runs a small business that's very intelligence-based, it obviously helps me think much, much better. It helped me a lot when I was writing my last book. I used the AI systems a lot. Yeah. To sketch out research domains, you have to check the references. You have to make sure it's not lying to you. But you can do that. You have to be careful with it, and you have to, interact with it intelligently. But and we've built specialized AI systems too that some of them based on my work that I consult because, that's an extension of my thinking, and that's been extremely helpful. And so,
I should mention alexepstein.ai is now free, so people should check that out.
Okay.
So that's now the latest version of Energy Talking Points. Is we're already having some elected officials use this for like floor speeches. Is you can have Alex AI write you a floor speech, and it's so we've spent a lot of money customizing an AI. And
that's alexepstein.ai.
.ai. And what it's really done is it's engineered with prompting that is very based on this even-handed and pro-human
Right,
thinking.
so you built that ethos into it.
Yes, and really one thing it does really well is question assumptions. So it scans everything for, does this question or statement have an assumption that Alex Epstein would disagree with? So for example, if you say, hey, Alex AI, how do we get to net zero by 2050 as quickly as possible? It doesn't just try to manufacture an answer. It says, would Alex agree that that's the right goal? And it says, well, actually, I disagree. I don't think this is the right goal. I don't think
question the premise.
Yes, exactly.
That's very funny.
Yeah, but that's one thing we had to.
That means it accurately reflects you.
Yes, exactly. It's just as annoying in some circumstances.
All right, let's go back to these 5 points.
So in terms of liberating, so let's make sure to at least one of the big things for this. So I would say with the liberating domestic development, one of the key things we need to do is address what's called NEPA. I don't know if you've heard this term. You might have heard it. It's National Environmental Policy Act. So this is one of the early environmental laws. And NEPA is the thing, and I forget what the Canadian equivalent is. I think you just passed a new version of this that's nuts. But it's basically, it's a duplicative review process. That's what NEPA is. So it basically says like any agency that does anything, it has to also go through an additional review for its quote unquote environmental impacts or impacts on the human environment. I mean, it's worded something like any significant impact on the human environment, and significant is not defined, environment isn't defined. So what it means is basically, and then it has to do with federal actions. So it's like a major federal action. But what is a federal action? Is it anything where federal law applies? Originally it was supposed to be, okay, the federal government is building like a giant bridge, that's a mile long or something like that. Is it going to cause any kind of major damage or something like that? And you write like a 10-page report. Now it's become every project imaginable is covered, and it can take 10 years. And one of the major mechanisms is judges can sue. So NEPA has no official authority to stop anything. It's just a review thing. But people can sue, activist groups can sue, and they can say you left out this bird on your NEPA review, you throw it back, and then the judge says, yeah, you have to do this. So in practice, this is the thing why we can't build any roads, why everything takes forever, why mine takes something like 15 years to permit.
So if you had put your 5 points here into one of these AI systems, could you ask it, for example, if we were moving in this conceptual direction, what policy changes should be implemented, prioritized by their benefit to cost?
I'll have to look now. When I tried it a year ago, it was horrible. It was, but it didn't have search back then. It didn't have a sophisticated processing. So with the search, it would be, it's a good thing. I'll do it right after this and see.
Because it's a Pareto distribution issue, right? There's going to be a couple of things you could change. They're going to have a disproportionately positive effect. And everything else is going to sort of...
Now interestingly, with this kind of thing, it's often very efficient to just talk to a very smart lawyer. So like lawyers that we pay, like at the top end, it's like, I think over $1,800 an hour. It's like we'll pay lawyers, and it's worth it because you can just ask them, like an expert in NEPA or an expert in electricity, like what really needs to change? Because you often find that the thing people talk about isn't the thing that really
exactly
matters.
My point. Yes,
so with
definitely.
NEPA, some of the things are like one of the big issues is like one of the big kinds of solutions is you can what's called limit NEPA to agency discretion. So basically the agency can do the NEPA review, but it basically decides, okay, we've done the review and it can't be challenged, like something like that. And and it's fine because it's the agency's responsibility to review the thing. You don't need to put everything in double jeopardy and just take forever and have outside people allowed to question your review. And basically, if it's the
that just makes it impossible.
Yeah, that's what it is. So that's this kind of thing where when politicians will talk about NEPA, they'll often say something like, let's limit the length of the process, right? Let's limit an environmental impact statement to 2 years or 1 year, or what's called an environmental assessment to a smaller amount of time. But they don't fully get that if you can still have infinite litigation on that. So even if you set a shot clock, if you have infinite ability to challenge it. So that's the kind of example where, and there's like specific.
That's a fix that won't work.
Yeah.